Good morning to everybody. Good morning to everybody, and hey, thanks for signing up and joining this webinar this morning. Looking forward to spending the next hour or so. We'll see how we get along here with you guys. But thanks for signing up and participating. By way of introduction, I'm Charlie Holt. I worked initially for Amoco Production Company and then later BP. I ended up with 38 years and 6 months and some odd days. Retired here just under a couple of years ago from BP. My entire career was in wells construction, drilling, completions, and interventions, covering most of the globe at one time or another. And in the last 25 or better years, focused pretty much on operations, drilling, completions, and interventions operations around the globe in various places. And so why is Charlie Holt here, a guy that's a driller, talking with you about crew resource management this morning? Well, I took a large interest in crew resource management because I'm not a professional of this. I'm not an expert of crew resource management by any means. But when the Deepwater Horizon event occurred in 2010, I was actually a drilling manager for 4 other rigs in the Gulf of Mexico for BP at that time, not the Deepwater Horizon, but 4 other rigs. And I went to work every day for 87 plus days, like a whole bunch of other people, until we were able to close some valves on that well. And during that whole time, had lots of sleepless nights, had lots of questions about, how did this happen? Post, the shutting in of that well and all the recovery and all the things that happened afterwards, I continued to dig into, read obviously all the material and talk with lots of people, and about why did this happen? Because I never would have figured that this would have happened in our industry, and at the end of the day, we at BP actually ended up doing a bit of work, and I ended up leading it in the space of training folks around crew resource management, because we reached a point to where that, I say reached a point, there were a number of things that didn't work. You're all familiar with the Swiss cheese model and how we ended up with the blowout that occurred at Deepwater Horizon. But there were a lot of human factors that were involved. Human factors in the space of the situation and the situational awareness, and human factors in the space of communications and teamwork. All of these things affected the outcome of that, or the results of that, or cause, not an outcome, but cause of such. And so, if you will, and I use this term every now and again, that I kind of got sheep dipped in this crew resource management, and during the course of building a course in that's around that, I ended up working with a number of naval aviators and a number of NASA folks and a number of folks that are experts in this space. And I said, at the end of the day, we need to do something in that space, and we need to bring that to bear. So what I'm going to do here today in this hour or less that we have, I'm actually just going to kind of introduce you to these concepts. I'm going to try to convince you that it's not just the aviation industry that uses crew resource management, but there are others, and that there's ample opportunity in the oil and gas industry to do the same. Okay, so to start with, we need to have the little legal bit, and this information shared in this webinar is by necessity a general nature. Petroskills makes no warranties, express, implied, or statutory with respect to the information in this webinar, including without limitation any warranties or merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Petra skills shall have no liability to any part or any ordinary, special, or consequential damages or losses which might arise directly from or indirectly by reason of users' use of information shared in this webinar. So, and I want to, obviously, that was legally written so that we make sure we communicate that this is not a training class. You're not intending to be able to go and practice these skills at the end of this, but rather it's just an information session. And I would even emphasize that in the space of the crew resource management, which I'll demonstrate to you in the coming slides, putting crew resource management in place is really a journey. Even attending a 3-day course that I've prepared for this would not prepare you to be an expert in that space, but it would, you really need to go down a journey, a path to develop the skills to use the same and take advantage of the same. So this slide, it's really about, and as I sat and thought about this in my days past, is we asked this question: why do competent personnel implementing agreed procedures fail to deliver operational excellence? And so when we have people that are trained, and we have people that are implementing procedures that have been signed off by, I don't know, I've seen procedures in working for one of the big oil and gas companies that had a whole signature page. There could be as many as 10 or 12 signatures on a single procedure for implementing. So everybody's looked at and said it's all great. And then we go to implement that, and then we end up failing somewhere along the way. And I'm hoping that I can share with you, and that you walk away today with the fact that, guess what? Human factors plays a part in that. And that's about personnel don't understand the situation, or the situation is changing along the way. I mean, I use a simple example that often on drilling rigs that we'll go and they'll have a morning safety meeting and talk about what they're going to do today and how they're going to do it and so forth. And during the course of that, they don't say anything about it might rain this afternoon. And then next thing you know, you're still doing the same things that you said you were going to do this morning. But now it's raining cats and dogs on that drilling rig, and we've never stopped and shut down and taken a look at, okay, does this change what it is that we're going to try to get done today? Sometimes haphazardly we stumble into that, but we don't really think about that frequently as part of what's happening today. Often information is missing, so we go to make decisions and we don't have all the information that's in place, and we end up making those decisions. We have failure to effectively communicate. You know, we include communication in lots of courses that we have all attended. I'm sure that every one of you have attended courses that had some sort of focus on communications. But frequently what that amounts to is that you need to communicate well. And you need to make sure, that people understand what you said, or you need to be able to write things down and communicate them. But even inside of that, we still fail frequently right in the space of communications. Let me give you an example. When I was still at BP, I actually there for a little while held the position of well control manager for BP. And we had an event, and it was an onshore event that was going on, and we had some gas in a well, and we were trying to figure out what was going on, because some of our surface data wasn't quite lining up with what we believed was happening downhole, and we had 450 psi on the surface, and so there was an agreement to bleed all 50 psi, and then watch it and then see what was going to happen. How did it come back to the 450? Did it come back more than the 450? How much fluid did we get back when we bled off to 50? Kind of standard practice to kind of figure out what's going on downhole. But what got communicated from the superintendent or the office there in the field And what got heard in the field was to bleed the pressure to 50 psi. That's a big difference. And the bottom line is where we were not able to. We were here in Houston, and we weren't able to actually see all the data that was being floated around. And they got it all the way down to 250 psi before somebody finally caught it and said, "Hey, wait a minute, what are y'all doing? What's going on?" And fortunately, we were able to bring ourselves back around and recover from that. But that's just a simple example of how often communications, we believe what we think we know what we said, but we're not sure what the other person heard. Team members aren't always informed. They're not always engaged. Leadership is weak or missing, and that's not to say we have all bad leaders. No, that's not it. That's not it. It's just that leaders have to know when to step in, and leaders have to know when to take charge. There's other factors that affect human performance, and I've got in parentheses there fatigue and stress. And we're all, I'm sure anybody that's been in the oil and gas industry or any other industry for an extended period of time, you have run up against the fatigue or stress of your job. Fatigue, not enough rest, not enough sleep, stress, delivery of your job. And those things affect our performance. They affect our decision making. And we don't always recognize those. We don't always take those to heart. And then kind of wrapped up in all of this is conjugative biases. Confirmation bias, where we're trying to use data that we have to confirm what we believe that is the answer. Anchoring, where we hear something early on and we don't listen to other things after that. Overconfidence in the data and the information that we have. I had a long time ago when I was building this CRM course at BP. I got invited to a number of our well site leader, that's the company man on location meetings, and to introduce some of these concepts and talk about them. And I still remember to this day, I was standing up there and I used the term conjugative biases. And there was a well site leader in the audience that I had met back in the early 80s, that I had known for many years, and he and I had worked together many times, and he raised his hand and kind of forced himself into the room and said, he says, "Charlie," he says, he says, "I've been drilling wells, running drilling rigs for 40 years, and I've never had to use conjugative bias in the past. Why do I need to use conjugative bias today?" And the bottom line is these biases, because they become our own personal biases, and I was able to answer his question, but at the end of the day, it's really the 40 years of experience that we get that is how we develop those biases. And we quit listening to other things. We quit listening to the fact that there may be a different way to do things. So it was quite an irony when he asked me about why does he need a conjugative bias. I want to share here with you, when we talk about crew resource management, often many people jump up and say well, that's the airline industry. The aviation industry uses that, and I don't need that. We don't need to use that. That was all built for them. Well, let's talk a little bit about how did crew resource management get started. And this is just an example here. This is kind of what kick-started some of the thoughts in this space. And so first, let's talk a little bit about the material on the slide. So Eastern Airlines Flight 401, flying from New York to Miami. And just before midnight on December the 29th, 1972, this plane crashed into the Everglades. There was 176 on board and 101 died. And in this case, when this occurred, the pilot, the co-pilot, and the navigator that was sitting behind the co-pilot there, they got completely preoccupied whenever they were going to land this plane that there was a landing gear light, which was their front landing gear, that did not come on when they put the landing gear down. And so they were concerned that the front landing gear wasn't down. And so they contacted the tower and told the tower, hey, we got a little issue here that we need to deal with. We'd like to come up and circle the airport here for a little bit until we figure this out. And the tower says, yep, no problem. Go, come up to 2,000 feet and put him on some sort of pattern to circle the airport until they figured this out. They put the plane on automatic pilot to fly there at 2,000 feet. And then they began to mess with this light. They tried to pull the light out of the dash. They tried to, they needed a pocket knife, they needed a pair of pliers. There's actually a video, if you're more interested in this particular event, just go Google Eastern Airlines Flight 401, and there's a really nice video that's a replay of what was happening in the cockpit. But at the end of the day, somehow or another, the plane came off of automatic pilot, and they started falling out of the sky. The tower even contacted them and wanted to know what was going on because they saw them the tower saw them losing elevation. But they were not paying attention to any of the ultimate. You see all those little arrows pointing is talking about how high this plane is in the air. And while they were continuing to mess with that light switch, they ended up flying into the ground, or into the Everglades, if you will. And this is what started the aviation industry into thinking about, by gosh, we got to get people more focused, such as situational awareness, and we need to do something different. And they didn't quite invent CRM at that point, but they did invent some training in this space. It was in the late 70s at a convention that NASA held, a conference that NASA held, when CRM, actually 1979, when CRM actually got put in place, and they started forward with training it in the aviation industry, across the aviation industry. So anyway, this is an extreme example of, but I show it because it's kind of the beginning of the airline industry recognizing that human factors plays a large part in the events that occur with airlines. So speaking of aviation industry, I threw this slide together some time ago, and I've even added to it and so forth. And I did this because I often get asked the question whenever I'm talking about CRM. Well, that's an aviation industry issue, and we don't have those kinds of problems in our industry or otherwise. And so this is not all of the events that had something to do with human factors, but not by any means. This is just some that when you see those names on there, all of you probably recognize the majority of them. And I'm going to summarize just real briefly. So Pan Am and KLM in 1977, you had two 747s that flew into each other. One of them was on the ground, one of them was headed down a runway in a foggy takeoff, and this was all about situational awareness and communications. 3 Mile Island, we've all heard about 3 Mile Island, a nuclear power plant releasing radioactive gases to the environment. They had a valve stuck open and had a failed indicator light. Oh, does that sound familiar? Flight 401, failed indicator light. And Chernobyl was over in Russia at that time, explosion and fire. And that was all during the course of testing a new system and lack of understanding the new system. Not everybody knew how the new system worked. It's Chernobyl. Herald Free Enterprise, that's a roll-on, roll-off ferry that capsized, and they failed to close the doors on the ferry. They left the dock and failed to close the doors. And that was via poor communications. Piper Alpha, we should all know about Piper Alpha. And what took place at Piper Alpha. That was all about a platform fire that took place in the North Sea, offshore Scotland. Poor handover between changing ships. Pump maintenance, not aware of pump maintenance and a valve that had been blocked off or pulled out and blocked off. And one of the leading things in there was leadership did not feel they had the authority to shut in the facilities. Wow. So leadership didn't feel like they had the authority. There's a fire, we got things on fire, and people didn't think they had the authority to shut it in. I mean, I'm gonna go into a short cul-de-sac here, and I'm sure that the majority or a bunch of you online have actually watched the Deepwater Horizon movie, and I too have watched it. I've watched it one time, and I haven't watched it again. But in that movie, there's this scene towards the end where nobody has the authority to go and hit the disconnect button, to hit the auto disconnect with the LMRP on the Deepwater Horizon until the OIM shows up, and that's where our industry, not only our industry, other industries have been, or at least that's what and by the way, that didn't happen on the Deepwater Horizon. That was for the movies. So let me be real clear. That was for the movies. Colleague, the Boeing 747 crashes into a mountain, and that was all about the crews ignoring the plane's instrumentation. Columbia, you guys should know about Columbia. That was where they damaged the tiles on takeoff and then never did follow up, and then tried to land the Columbia, and it disintegrated on its way in over Texas. Texas City, one of the BP explosions, and that was all about communications, training, cost-cutting events. I've already mentioned Deepwater Horizon several times here, and communications decisions without all the information. And then, of course, there was the cruise ship that ran into the rocks in the Mediterranean. But so there are some of those are obviously on water or otherwise, but there are other situations that have occurred, incidences that have occurred that all have to do with situational awareness that resulted in loss of life, many lives on this particular slide. So what is CRM, or sometimes, and we use lots of acronyms, CRM, Crew Resource Management, NTS is non-technical skills. And there's a fella in 2008 that wrote this phrase down, and it kind of sticks. When you go look up CRM, you'll find his name show up here and there and yonder. But it's the conjugative social and personal resource skills that complement technical skills and contribute to safe and efficient task performance. So that's really about, we know we're trained, we're experienced, we're implementing something that has been approved, but we need these other skills to make sure that all of those things work properly. Successful use. So we've obviously talked about aviation. I mentioned nuclear, rail, military, shipping, medical. Medical took on, it was hard for me to find, I think it was somewhere in the 2008 to 2012 timeframe when they started dabbling in it, and they really didn't get fully up to speed until probably 12 to 14 timeframe. But I don't know if you know this, but in the U.S., even today, there could be as many as 100,000 people a year that die because of some sort of not bad, but human factors, medical procedure associated with human factors. That's still a big number, still a large number. I don't have it on this list, but in the Wells organization, the drilling organization, back in the early 2000s, we actually dabbled in this space, and we had a well site leader training event that we had for all of our well site leaders, and we incorporated a number of the CRM skills. Not all of them. We didn't call it CRM, but we did talk about communication, and we did talk about situational awareness, and we did talk about teamwork. So there's been some efforts in that space, even by BP. So even today, so those of you that are in the wells part of our industry, you probably recognize or know that both IEDC and IWCF have a well control school that they teach. That it's an advanced well control school that incorporates CRM. It's Well Sharp Plus, and then IWCF, I think they just call theirs Advanced Well Control with CRM or CRM Well Control. And that came about because the Oil and Gas International Oil and Gas Producer, IOGP. There you go, IOGP. All these acronyms that I can't even remember. They had a team that put together a paper, basically a report that said that in well control training, this was post Deepwater Horizon, that in well control training we need to incorporate crew resource management. And so they put together and suggested that, and then IEDC and IWCF created it. But guess what? It's not mandatory. It's only by choice. The regulatory agencies around the world don't require it. It's by company choice to use such. Other companies, the big companies, the Chevrons and the BPs and the Exxons, they all have CRM efforts inside of their organizations. But at least when I left BP didn't have any training in that space. They were going down a path of doing some videos and sharing some things in that space, but in any event, it's been slow to grab, slow to happen in the oil and gas industry. So I've talked a lot here about these non-technical skills, and I never have. I've kind of mentioned them in reference a few of these, but this is the 6 non-technical skills that the airline industry, or the aviation industry created back in 1979. That's kind of still sticking together today. The medical industry changed up a few of these a little bit. I think that nuclear power changed them up a little bit, but these are the ones that the airline industry still uses today. So we've mentioned situational awareness, gathering information and understanding the consequences and problems associated with those. Decision making is all about defining the situation and goals. Recognizing previous experiences, the risk associated, communications, exchange information in explicit context, clear and concise. I don't think we'll ever get there in the oil and gas industry, but the aviation industry, any of you that are pilots or any of you that had a chance to talk with pilots, they've always got this read back. So if the tower says come to 5,000 at 260, well then the pilot always comes back, Roger, 5,000 at 260, and that's just to confirm that's what I heard you say. I'm not sure we'll ever get there, but the aviation industry, because of their risk, they are there all the time. Teamwork is who's responsible, coordinating task, resolving gaps, duplications, inconsistencies, working relationships. I mean, we've all worked on teams where not everybody on the team knew each other. Not everybody on the team understood each other's backgrounds. And when you're doing things that are high risk, or things that if you do things right, wrong, or indifferent could result in an incident, kind of be nice to know who that team members are that you're working with and what their experiences are, and whether or not you need to check or double check their efforts. So working relationships is a key part of teamwork. Leadership. Leadership's all about taking charge, providing direction, prioritizing tasks, and then again, the factors that impact human performance. Stressors is a word that's been used, and it's really about identifying, mitigate those effects. Okay. So warning signs don't need to spend a bunch of time on this slide. But I'm sure that at one time or another, all of you have been in a place where, you thought there was some ambiguity, or you thought there might have been some personal conflict, some confusion. Gut feeling is still, got some validity for me. My gut says that this doesn't feel right. Vague statements. So those things, all of those things lead to, do we really know or understand the situation that we have in hand? So I'm going to spend a little bit of time here. So CRM, through resource management, these are the things on this list that is pretty well required, in my efforts in dealing with naval aviators and pilots and NASA and so forth. If you don't have these, or if one or two of these is missing, you're probably not going to get all of the benefits. You still would get some benefits, but you're not going to get all the benefits from CRM. So I'll run down through each of them here. You got to have buy-in from the top to bottom. So this is not something that the guy at the top of the pile says, yeah, I'm an ex-naval aviator, and yep, this is what we used, and now everybody's going to use it. And then two levels below them, they don't believe, that individual, that leader doesn't believe that this is going to have any benefit. Everybody's got to get on the same page, and everybody has got to be supportive of the effort. Otherwise, you're going to have some gaps in the ability to deliver this. Ideally, that doesn't mean that that's the only way it can be done, but ideally, this is team-based training. So we're training teams. One of the things that a number of the large oil and gas companies have done, it's only typically been done here recently in the deep water arena, and that is they do some basically simulate the well on a simulator, and they include CRM in those sessions. Maersk out at they've got a program that they do, their Maersk training organization. And typically you will include the rig team, and you'll include the service companies, and you'll include the operator, and you'll include the contractor and so forth, and do some team-based training. And if one was going to implement CRM for a number of the pumpers field personnel in West Texas, you would want to include all of them and their supervision to make this work, because at the end of the day, you're actually teaching a new language. And if only one or three people have this new language, you're going to be speaking French to the others. Scenario-based simulator tabletop exercises. The training that I've been associated with has all been scenario-based, and scenario-based is where either via using a simulator, or again, it can be done on tabletop exercises. An individual, not an individual, but a team is posed a problem, posed a challenge in some way, shape, or form that requires them to use these tools that I've described previously, and to actually successfully deliver or perform this particular task that they're being asked to do. And up to the point, including curveballs that are thrown at them along the way, so that they actually have to use some of these tools. That's pretty standard for CRM training, is that kind of events. I like the idea, and the scenario-based is use scenarios that actually are familiar that have that company or that organization would be familiar with. So no, we don't need to do a Flight 401 scenario with a bunch of guys running a plant in Texas City. We need to have some Texas City scenarios, plant scenarios to do. So refresher training, you have to continue to do the refresher training with this to get it to stick. All of those, the medical industry, the aviation industry, the first responders, et cetera, they're all doing refresher training constantly. Every time that the airline pilots come in and do their research, there's some CRM refresher training that comes with that. In fact, actually, the airline industry is actually United, I believe. They've actually started where they're doing, at the end of a flight, they're actually doing a post CRM assessment. So they're doing a wash up of, hey, when we did this flight and we did this, how did we do in the CRM space? Just to keep it up front. One of the things that has happened in a number of these other industries, and it's beginning to happen in the oil and gas industry, but CRM and human factors needs to be part of your investigation. So, and I say investigations. This doesn't have to be a safety investigation. It could actually be a performance. We're a stuck pipe event or something else that gets investigated. To look at how did human factors play in this event. Okay. Eventually, what happens is, which is what a number of these industries have done, is that CRM gets embedded in all the training that's there. So it's not something you go to CRM training. No, you're going to go to training to do X, Y, Z, but it's going to include CRM, and it has to be owned by the organization. And in fact, what I'm trying to promote here at PetroSkills is that let me teach you how to incorporate or to bring CRM to your organization, and then let me show you how to own it in the future, and then I'm going to go away. So it's changing of a culture is what it's really about. But it again is answering that question. Remember the question I asked on one of those first slides is why do trained and competent people implementing approved and agreed procedures still fail to deliver? And these things are often, not always, but often the reason why these things, CRM awareness. So another summary here of what CRM awareness is situational awareness is being able to diagnose the situation based on the information gathered. Decision making is reaching a judgment and choosing an option. Communications is exchanging appropriate information. Teamwork, working effectively, interdependently with groups of 2 or more people. Personal leadership, being able to influence others. And then recognizing the stressors that can occur. Decision making and how we make decisions. I got a chance to go over to New Orleans and be deposed post the Deepwater Horizon event, and I had a lawyer there during the course of that was kind of trying to beat me up in the space of, how is it that BP makes decisions? How do you make a decision? Okay, you're the drilling manager for the Discover Enterprise. So how do you make decisions? And I described to him kind of what would come out of this. You're going to gather information. You're going to talk with people that have experiences in this space. You're going to make sure that you've identified the risk and you're going to identify the contingencies. And then, there's sometimes when the decision is not going to be obvious, where you're just going to have to step in and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. Based upon all this information, based upon this data that we have, this is the decision that we're going to make. And be prepared, to be successful. Hope that you're successful. And if you're not successful, well, then you need to learn from that and then be able to make sure that you don't make that same mistake again, at another time in the future. And and this lawyer was he just wouldn't accept that. He wouldn't accept that that's how you make decisions. And I said, well, you got a better idea, then let me know. But that's what we're talking about here. So last slide. We're 41 minutes in, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide because I've actually referenced this on a number of occasions. But PetroSkills has got a program, Operations CRM, and I even added the /journey because it is a journey. And ideally, this is where we collaborate with your organization or an organization, and we run some pilots. We get everybody engaged. Remember, I said everybody has to be bought in, and then we go find real case histories and scenarios, and then we start sharing, and we get folks to talk in this new language. And then we haven't been able to pull the trigger because of a number of reasons, and the most recent pandemic has got us slowed down. But we're going to offer some public offerings, maybe late 2020, maybe it's 2021 with the things that are going on, to be able to at least bring folks in and let them get a taste of it, let them get a chance to see what we're talking about here. Even maybe before, committing to a pilot inside of their organization or whatever. So we won't spend a lot of time there in the advertising space. But I'm going to quit talking here. Hopefully, Clay has brought a few questions, or you've brought a few questions in, or some discussion. Doesn't have to be questions, discussions. Maybe some comments that folks have from their perspective. Happy to hear that. And again, I want to thank you for participating this morning. I'm very passionate about this. I got my passion by the sleepless nights of how did Deepwater Horizon happen, to us as an industry, to us as an organization. And hey, guess what? I was working. I was looking after 4 of those rigs in the Gulf of Mexico before this occurred. And so anyway, with that, Clay, if you want to come back in and see where we are.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. I've got a couple questions here that have come in. Again, if anyone wants to type questions in the chat, that is where I will receive them. So the first question came in earlier. In a high-risk industry like oil and gas, why isn't this crew resource management approach already widely used?
Yeah, Clay. We've pondered that a bunch. A number of us have pondered it, and I referenced a few of those responses earlier, and that is that. There's a lot of people that really don't understand, and they believe that crew resource management is an aviation industry solution, and that it doesn't apply otherwise. There's another thing that we believe, a number of us that have talked about this, is the urgency post Deepwater Horizon. Kind of went and passed us by. It was there, and then it disappeared, and so the urgency. There's not an edict from the regulators. I don't believe that they're going to be. We've actually had conversations with the Center for Offshore Safety recently to see what kind of traction we might be able to get, but there's not an urgency because of an event. There's not a requirement because of the regulators, and so it still just kind of sits in the background, and we don't have a real good answer to that question. But it's really about people becoming more educated, and guess what? This webinar is a start to that. Attending one of the sessions that PetroSkills offers in the future is an answer to that, and hey, guess what? We're hoping, I'm hoping that the well control training that's been initiated, that a number of people are going to go to that, and then they're going to have the eye-opening experience that I need to do this beyond just well control, and there'll be some more interest in the same. So there's not a direct answer, but there's the answer that I have, Clay.
All right. Next question that came in the current environment where travel is restricted, how does this strategy change to be delivered virtually or online?
Yeah, very good question. I believe that to progress CRM, that we're going to have to get back in the place where we're able to get face-to-face. The courses that I've been associated with, the courses that even the well control courses that exist out there, you have to get face-to-face. You have to have a team that's together to be able to get the collaboration, whether it be desktop or over a simulator. But you're going to have that collaboration to get those experiences. Yeah, can you go out there and can I take what I just showed you and add 60 more slides and you be more knowledgeable and more aware? Yeah, from a if you will, theoretical, from a theory perspective, would you be more knowledgeable of this? Yes, but you would not have practiced. And the industry, whether it be airline where they use their simulators, nuclear power where they use their simulators, rail where they use their simulators, even medical trains in a simulated operating environment. You're not going to get a chance to practice, and if you don't get a chance to see and practice those skills, it's going to be really hard for you to take them and go use them effectively. So we're going to need to get face to face, and that's going to probably continue to slow our progress here of making CRM happen inside of the oil and gas industry. So.
All right. Next question here is, I believe it's referencing your last slide where you mentioned the pilots. It says, are there any particular groups in organizations that you recommend for initial pilots?
Yeah, there's. I would suggest that this has the most benefit with field personnel, those that are using their hands to get the work done, and then that first line supervision above them. And I say get their hands done. It's really about if you looked at a drilling rig, it would be the roughneck and the drillers. If you're looking at the production operations, it would be the pumpers and the supervisors. If you're looking at a plant operation, it would be some of the maintenance people, and then those in the control room. So that's the group of folks that are operationally implementing is a really good place to start. It works, and there's value to the engineers in the office and otherwise, but the real value is those that are actually on the front line, where the rubber meets the road. In any organization, I've talked a lot about drilling here, drilling well construction, but even the course that we offer, it's not about drilling. We have plant scenarios, and we have intervention scenarios, and we can build any kind of scenario. So it's not limited to the well construction business, but it could be in the marine business, it could be in the plant operation business, it could be in the construction business, the facility of construction. All of those have opportunities for human factor enhancements.
Okay. Next question here is, could CRM help unpredicted situations? For example, would it be useful to manage safe operations during pandemic scenario where new schedules or shifts are increased and therefore stressors are more present?
Yeah, I believe it could be. I hadn't thought about that with the pandemic, but we're operating in a different way today across the globe, and so the communications are so much more important today than when you're face to face. Teamwork and in the space of how we're working today. Understanding changing situations by being remote somewhere. So yeah, I believe that there would be some real benefits, and maybe even more so than I've thought about, in the face-to-face world that we used to live in.
Okay, and then this is the last question, unless anyone else has additional ones. Again, feel free to type it into the chat. But this one says, company cultures seem to be very strong in most oil companies, and it seems that the cultural biases make this approach very difficult. So how do you overcome those deeply rooted cultures?
Yeah. Kind of circles back to that first question a bit, and because changing a culture is very difficult, and that's why I use the term journey, because I believe that in order to take advantage of these tools that are there, it will be a journey, and so yes, those are headwinds. And I get asked the question, so tell me, if I go do CRM, how much money am I going to save? and so I'm going to spend this money training, and so now how much money am I going to save? And we've actually, in conversations with a couple of companies, have sat down and done a little simple, Bayesian analysis that says, well, okay, if you have this event and it costs you this much money, and you have that happen 10% of the time, and then it costs you this much to train these people, yada yada yada, and we can show that the training is cheap. The training is cheap relative to the cost of some of the events that occur, and but changing a culture and not just a company, but even inside of a team inside of a company is a bit challenging, and but I believe that this tool will enable some things to happen that we haven't done or haven't been able to do in the past. Let me give you an example right quick since this is the last question and we're about to wrap up. But one of the things that I promote is, so everybody on this call has probably asked the question once or twice in their career or their lifetime. So how do I communicate learnings from incidences? So when I have an incident that occurs and we go investigate it, and then 4 years, and we put some things in place, and then 4 years later that same incident occurs or something similar that has and believe me, I did it for 38 plus years, and we had repeat incidences on a number of occasions, and one of the things that I promote is in this journey of CRM is that once you kind of learn the language, and in a way to keep this tool, these tools functioning or working, or keep them on the forefront, is that you would use incidences that occurred inside of your company, that you identified the human factors associated with those as examples to continue your learning in the human factors space. And some organizations that lands, and that's a great idea, and we could use that, and others are kind of like, well, I don't know how that's going to benefit me, but we by going down this journey where you're continuing to talk about, and that's what you will need to do to change that culture, is to continue to include and incorporate these human factors skills in the things we do. That is a way to continue to share your learnings and continue with the human factors learnings. So That's the best I can do. Cultures are tough to change, and that's why I've chosen the word journey, because it will take some time. This is not the course that I put together is really about getting kick-started, and it's probably 2 to 3 to 4 years before those organizations actually are a fine-honed machine.
All right. Well, hey, thank you, Charlie. Really appreciate you putting this together for us. Thank you to all of our attendees. Great questions, and we appreciate you taking this time with us today. My quick marketing plugs that I'm obligated to do as a marketing guy. Check our website. We do have some other really good webinars coming up in the next few weeks, and so we would love you to join us at those as well. And again, I will be sending out the recording of this session afterwards, and feel free to pass that along to colleagues or others. So thank you. Have a good rest of your day or afternoon or evening, and we appreciate you joining us. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Clay.